Hey everybody, on this final episode of Season 4, enjoy a sit-down with Jared Burkholder and our two global partners, Jimmy and Emily. On this episode, you will hear how the two of them met, a little bit about their ministry, and how you can be praying for them and their family as they seek to spread the hope of the gospel in their context. Welcome to Magnify.
Hello.
Check what do.
Hello. Check.
Check what do. Check. Coming at you live and hot from Grace Baptist Church.
How do you feel being on your first podcast, Jimmy?
How do you feel about me being on my first podcast with you?
This is such a special moment. I mean, of all the things, all the firsts you guys have had, this is the first time you've been on a podcast. I'm just so honored to be here.
Yes. As you should be, Jared.
I really am overwhelmed by it. I'm trying to keep it together. Probably going to tear up here. Zion, I'm sorry. There are, in fact, 0 fisheyes in this room right now. I'm sorry about that.
Bummer.
No.
So this isn't live, right?
No, not like broadcasting.
I don't know how podcasts work.
We know.
I just listen to them when Emily puts them up.
So,
and,
so you guys, you listen to podcasts normally
Yes.
in your context?
Well,
What's your favorite, you guys have a go-to?
Tim Keller.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not a podcast, I guess. That
no,
is
he
more
has
of,
a podcast
sermons.
that we do listen to, though.
That's cool. Yeah.
We will listen to a lot of podcasts by Ravi Zachariah for a while.
Ravi Zacharias, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, Nabil Qureshi. Sorry.
Well, he was under that same,
Okay.
whatever it's called, but he did debates with Muslim scholars that were really interesting. So
I bet that's probably
we would listen to those. Have you heard of the Bible Project?
I have.
So there's a couple of episodes that are pretty good.
I mostly just listen to food podcasts. You guys are obviously nurturing your souls with what's going on in podcasts.
Food podcasts, like recipes or just experiences with food?
Every time I talk to our partners, and I realize I think it was C.S. Lewis who talked about there's something wrong with with Americans who talk about food while they're eating food, right? It's a really big problem. But yeah, they just talk about trends in food or things like that. It sounds pretty nerdy now that I'm talking about it, so I'm going to stop talking about it. So I don't know if you guys are New Year's resolution people. I feel like there's 2 very strong camps, at least in the States. Mm-hmm. There's people who are every year I reflect, I'm thankful, I pray, I make, and then other people kind of hate that. Do you guys make New Year's resolutions normally? What's your New Year's tradition? Besides, obviously, pork and cabbage.
When you're as disciplined as Jimmy, it's hard to all of a sudden be I'm going to be more disciplined because then...
I am so impressed. I mean, usually we're talking at 5 a.m. your time.
I know.
And he's already worked out.
I know. He's I've been up for an hour already.
15 eggs and, all kinds of stuff. And then he's what'd you do today? Well, I had a cheeseburger and then I had cookies and then I sat at my desk all day.
It's true. There are some questions by, I think it's Don Whitney, that he has a couple different questions. There's 10 questions for a new year or something. So at the very least, I like to just kind of review those and pray through them and just see if there's anything kind of pressing about, ways that I need to be more intentional or areas of growth. But those are also helpful to go throughout the year, I think.
Yep,
I think I just don't like the pressure of feeling okay, I'm going to be a whole new person. And then, 2 weeks in, it's oh no, I'm not a whole new person.
I'm the same stale person I was.
Yeah.
Well, listener, I'm here with Grace partner Jimmy and Emily, and we're also fortunate to have their young son Zion here. So if you hear a kid in the background, it's not the haunted kids that float in the hallways here at Grace Baptist Church. It's just their son Zion. You guys have been Grace partners for about 9 years, serving in Southeast Asia. In a security-sensitive country, so we're gonna talk generally about some specifics related to your ministry. One of the things I love about Grace Baptist Church is many of our partners have grown up here and been sent out from here. There is a group of young people who are considering that right now. There's about 5 of them who are trying to explore what God is calling them to do. So just talk us through your calling into missions. How was it that you first kind of experienced that? We think it's really important that other people affirm that. It's not just you going I want to go to another country. So how did you experience that? And then what was some of the preparation that you guys did in order to get to the field?
Why doesn't Emily go first since she's a couple years older.
Oh,
Whoa!
okay.
Just shooting shots here in the morning.
Wow.
A couple years older. She's more mature. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, the first thing I can attribute it back to was in high school, I read the book Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. And I vividly remember one night I was babysitting for this family and the kids were in bed. So I, had finished this book. And I remember just sitting there and being like, oh my gosh, I think that the Lord's calling me to go to another country and to make his name known where it's not known. But I'm like 16. I have no idea what that means. I've never even been out of the country, never even been on an airplane at that point. So it was really intimidating. But yeah, I think my only context for overseas work at the time was short-term trips in Mexico. But I really wasn't good at building houses. So I was like, well, guess this isn't for me because I'm not good at this. And then it was after my first year at Masters, I was attending Grace and they were doing a short-term trip to the Czech Republic with Josiah Venture. And my older brother had already gone the year previously. And so he talked about it and it was like all relational. And so that was really appealing to me because I was like, what? You can go and do this and it's just about relationships and it's not about building houses, I want to, hear more about this. And so I ended up doing the next 3 summers with Josiah Venture in Czech through Grace. And at that time,
this was before Landon and Jenny were there, right? Was Landon part of those?
He was part of the short term.
Trips? That's great.
Yeah, Landon and Jenny had just started dating.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, yeah. And so then I went through, at the time, Mike Gaston was the missions pastor and they did like a missionary training program, it was called. So there was certain books that, we needed to read. And then I don't remember how often I needed to meet with Mike for kind of some mentoring. I want to say it was like quarterly or something. And then that kind of got more frequent as you got closer to, potentially going out. And so then I did a 6-month trip with Josiah Venture to Czech and really thought that was going to be where I was going to be till the day I died. And then, it was during that time that John Piper again listened to a sermon and it was about, that there were still places in the world where there was no church planted, no believers among them. And so that was kind of the first thing God used to kind of direct my heart towards the Muslim world. And so, it was very involved at Grace through that time. And there was lots of people here who were just super missions minded, very globally minded. And so that was really encouraging for me to be in that environment and just learning from all the different Grace partners who would come through and, visit and just sitting down with them and hearing their stories. So.
Yeah. Jimmy, tell us your side of it. What was kind of your first experience of a calling, and then how did the Lord confirm that and prepare you?
So my dad grew up in Africa. My grandparents were missionaries. As a kid, I grew up just with an understanding of missions and missionaries and the importance of having people going all over the globe to talk about the good news. It was something I never considered, something that never crossed my mind as something that I would be doing long term or at all really a part of my life. And then I was going to college at Cal State Long Beach, taking some courses there that had nothing in regards to missions or ministry. And it was November 27th. It was a Thursday, my sophomore year. It was a praise and worship night at Bethany Church, which is where I was going to church at the time. And the Lord just really gripped my heart. And he desired that I truly just surrender my heart to him and leave everything else behind. And it was at that moment that I knew that the Father was calling me into some sort of ministry, specifically into doing evangelism. And from there, my heart was growing for the lost, for the unreached. And I applied to Moody Bible Institute. And surprisingly enough, I got accepted. So from there, the Father was growing in my heart a desire to work with Muslims, to go into locations that there was no workers there. And along that journey, I met Emily.
And the rest, as they say, is history. So you guys met, got married, settled on the country that you guys chose, the location that you chose. You've been there for 9 years. Talk us through like what an average day or week looks like. I think sometimes people have like these hyper mythologized understandings of like, we wake up in the morning and we walk out on our balcony and just proclaim Jesus. I mean, you have a very normal life, but also a very intentional life. So talk us about just what a normal day and normal week looks like for you.
On a given week, we try to make sure that we have a Sabbath day or just a day that we're not doing anything as a family. And so I, being a schedule-oriented person, I come to my wife usually on Saturday night and ask, can we talk about the following week? And so we will prioritize that Sabbath day and figure out when that will be and what our family will be doing to find rest and to rejuvenate and to really guard our time just as a family, or Emily and I freeing each other up to have some more intentional extended time with the Father. Outside of that, Emily is doing homeschooling with the kids usually in the morning, and I am doing activities, whether they be ministry related, going out and following up with contacts, or whether they be business related, going and getting things done for our tourism business. But usually, always in the afternoons, we are trying to be around the home, to be engaged with our neighbors, to be in community. And that is usually everyone's kind of perspective. All of our neighbors, some of them being farmers, will come back home around 3:30 or 4. And, it's just kind of this community family feel. And then what's called Maghrib, which starts at about 6 p.m., which is one of the calls to prayer. But that's usually a time where everyone kind of goes home. We really try to prioritize Sabbath as a family. And Emily does a really outstanding job of doing homeschooling with the kids. And some days she'll let me help her doing homeschooling with the kids. I don't know if it helps or if it makes things worse. And some of those times when I do homeschooling with the kids, Emily will usually take that time to go do some ministry activities outside the home, whether it's following up with contacts or people that she's been engaging with. Sometimes it is her going to a village and doing some lactation consultant work or some sort of social project, or sometimes she'll be working on the book that she's currently writing.
That's right. Emily, tell us about the book you're currently writing.
Nice plug, Jimmy. Thanks.
Available from Zondervan for $14.99.
Yeah, I have the opportunity to work with a publisher called Kaleidoscope. And they have a few books already published, but they are trying to create a volume on every book of the Bible for kids who are about ages 8 to 12. So they're too old for the classic, children's storybook Bible, but they're too young to be able to just sit down with, their Bible and a commentary and figure out, what the book of, for example, Hosea is about. And so it's kind of written in the format of a chapter book that is also a bit of commentary that will kind of help them place that story within the larger storyline of Scripture. And so I am working on the book of Hosea. And so it'll be
You picked an easy one then?
Yeah, picked a real easy one.
Sure.
Describing really easy topics to kids.
Yep. That's great.
Yeah, I think, Jimmy, did you talk about, though, a lot of his day-to-day is going out and following up with contacts we already have, or sometimes it's honestly to really unglamorize, if that's a word, the whole missions life. It's just like running around trying to get some signature on some paperwork for a visa or for, it's really not anything spectacular. And so there's weeks where it's like, what did we even accomplish this week? Well, I got this one signature that took me 4 days to try to track the person down or something like that. But he usually will go out in the morning to follow up with people or survey new places to take our guests for the business, which to be intentional about finding villages or communities where it's not just a cool place to go and look at, but it also has people that we can go and invest in. And so he'll do that in the mornings and then come join us for lunch and then usually be out again a bit in the afternoon getting stuff done or doing, he'll often work from home, just doing a lot of like emails and kind of the more administrative side of the business. And then, like he said, the afternoons are kind of our time to just be in community.
That's great.
One thing that we do enjoy doing, we probably do it about 3 or 4 days a week, is that we will host national workers in our home for a meal. It's usually dinner. And then that goes into usually a dance party and just hanging out through the evening. And sometimes that there's an extended invitation just to stay at our house. That's not uncommon if you're at someone's house and it's getting, close to 8:30 p.m. to just say, hey, you should just stay here tonight. And so that often happens. But I know that's something that we've all thoroughly enjoyed, but I know Emily specifically has been on a journey of understanding truly what is biblical hospitality as opposed to hosting, which is maybe more what many of us have grown up doing or being a part of in our homes. But, what does it mean to love the foreigner? What does it mean to love on people when it's not convenient? What does it mean to cook extra food, not knowing if someone's going to show up or not show up? So I think that's something that our family really does enjoy. And not just with national workers, but with friends that are neighbors or people that are not believers. But generally speaking, we probably host national workers at our home 3 to 4 days a week. And we're really blessed by that. And many of them have become aunts and uncles to James and Finley, and they look forward to it. And it's usually an encouraging time. I know they're very blessed by Emily's creativity in the kitchen to try some meals that normally they don't get to try. So
that's awesome. It's obvious, from my friendship with you, but just even hearing you talk, that you guys have figured out what you're both good at and how you complement each other. Just kind of talk about that, because I think that's really significant in marriage, but then certainly in a ministry partnership like this.
Yeah, so Jimmy and I could not be more opposite in every way. Night owl, morning person. I don't know, super organized, super unorganized, like everything you could throw at us, we would probably see it completely differently. And I think in especially the first year of marriage, probably first 2 years of marriage, there was a lot to work through because of that, because everything we would experience, we experienced it in the opposite way or had the opposite viewpoint on it. And so obviously, marriage is always a work in progress, but I do feel like the Lord has really helped us to, see how, my weaknesses and his strengths are often very complementary and then vice versa. And so, for Jimmy, he's a very time-oriented person, but I am not, and we live in a culture that is not. And so I think the Lord really wanted him to be like, okay, fine, I don't have to always, have everything figured out to the 5-minute mark. And for me, it's really helpful, like Jimmy said, to actually sit down and figure out our week instead of just going by, on the fly, because I'm able to love my family better. I'm able to love our guests better if I have at least a bit of a framework for the week. And so, I think it's just been a lot of seeing different ways the Lord has gifted us and then how we can really encourage each other in those things where, where I'm often lacking, he's like fully there, and then vice versa. And so, it's been really not easy, but it's been encouraging just to see how the Lord has taken our very different personalities and used them to kind of pick up where each other is lacking.
So different. I have nothing to add to that. I agree with Emily. But I think it's great how that organically just kind of flows into how we try to parent our children. James and Finley are twins, but they're completely different people. Obviously, James is a boy and Finley is a girl, but just their personalities are very different. And the ways that we need to nurture and care for them are very different as well. That takes time. It takes energy. But I think over the years of marriage with Emily, I think just continue to recognize her strengths and just the ways that the Father has given her just unique gifts and how those just are a blessing to my journey with the Father and my finding deeper intimacy with him. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for the ways that she is showing me how is it, to love our children in moments, when it's very difficult or when I'm having a hard time. And that's usually bedtime. And so Emily will come over and tell me, Emily will come over and tell me, everything's going to be okay, Kyle. And, don't ask me where we got that phrase. We got it from some TV show or something like that. It's just an inside joke.
That's
but
an internet meme.
It's the ability for me just to smile and take a deep breath and just recognize, like, everything's going to be okay. It doesn't matter if our kids go to bed 15 minutes later than they usually do. And she'll just gently do that in a non-judgmental way. But I agree with Emily and just that, it takes a lot of work, but we're very blessed just by each other and our differences. So
that's great. I'm the same way. my kids go to bed at 1 for a nap and 7. And like when Janelle's not there and I'm putting them down at 12:59, the light clicks off and I high five myself for a job well done.
Are you interested in becoming a member at Grace Baptist Church? Our first membership class of 2024 will be on Saturday, January 27th at 8 a.m. This morning class is a great opportunity to hear more about who we are, the commitment of membership, and meet some of our pastors. To sign up or get more information, visit gracebaptist.org/membership. Hope to see you there.
You guys have suffered a lot of loss over the years. There's been medical complications. You've lost family members. There's been lots of other trials. There's been accidents, motorcycle accidents, and cars flipping, and all kinds of crazy things. How have you experienced the nearness and the comfort of the Father through that? I think we graduate college, we go into ministry with a general sense of God's nearness and goodness. We often have a time to minister that to other people. It's something totally different to experience his nearness, particularly in a foreign and difficult context. I'm just curious how you guys have experienced that personally, especially through seasons of hardship. And it's been, I almost feel like it's been unrelenting in some ways for you guys the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, this home assignment has actually been like a break from, you get off the freeway and you just kind of are just chilling. Mm. Yeah, because our previous term started with Emily's accident. And since then, it almost feels like accident, and then recover, accident, recover. And so it feels like this whole past term, we've been, working through just like recovering and, and almost anticipating what will be the next difficult thing that we will have to tackle. And some of those things are more physically related and some of them are emotionally related. But again, I think just going back to the marriage thing, it truly is amazing when one of us is having a hard time or going through a very difficult season, just maybe trust or just our walk with the Lord, it seems like the other is there to really just not pull them out of it, but just to be present with them. I think that's something I really learned this last term, is just to be with my wife and just sit with her in moments of grieving and loss. And that's a lot coming from someone who's much of a doer. I like to be doing things. I like to see a problem and fix the problem. And so this past term has been filled with lots of things that I just can't fix, but it's just more so taking a posture of just being present. Yeah, and it really has allowed me to recognize just really how the Father and how the Spirit can be at work in our lives and how to seek his face and to wait upon him as he is with us in the valleys.
That's good.
Yeah, I think for me, a little bit of backstory to kind of share how the Lord has really met me in the last couple of years is, so I don't know, maybe it's been like 7 years ago now, our first teammates, the wife and I started studying the Bible, one book every month for a whole month. And so it took us 5 years to go through the whole Bible. So we already did our first cycle and now we're into our second cycle. So essentially there's no like framework apart from you spend a whole month just immersing yourself in one book of the Bible. And so I think what the Lord did through that was that it really just kind of anchored my heart in the story that God is writing throughout redemptive history and how it's not over yet. And I think just being able to see so many of these stories we know throughout Scripture. And, when you read it and you think, okay, like you read it with the perspective, like we already know how it ended and we know what God was doing in it, but they didn't. And they were sitting in it just like, what is God doing? I think of Joseph, like, okay, I'm sold as a slave by my own brothers, left for dead, like, then I'm faithful and then I get accused of adultery or, raping someone and I didn't do it. And then I'm thrown in prison and then, just thing after thing. And it's like all he was doing was being faithful. That's all it's, he's never really doing anything to deserve any of that or I don't know, or just story after story in Scripture where it's like, we know in the end God used Joseph's life to preserve Israel and through a famine, but he didn't know that in the midst of it. It was like, God, what in the world are you doing, as I sit here in this prison cell? And so I think for me, really just immersing myself in the story of God helped carry me in moments where I could not see a single thing that God was doing. Just as an example, so I had this accident where I almost died. I was in the ICU, really long recovery, and we kind of barely took our breath from that. And then our youngest, Zion, who was not even 1 at the time, started having seizures. We didn't know why. There was all these medical tests going on. And then kind of a little bit of a break from that. And then both of my parents passed away within the span of a month. And I remember kind of probably the lowest point of all of that was my mom and my dad both entered the ICU on the same day. And we were in Southeast Asia. And that same day, I woke up and I had COVID symptoms. And that was actually why I saw the text saying that my dad had his stroke. And then, I ended up having COVID. So we couldn't get on a flight for 3 weeks because we all had to test negative and we couldn't all get a negative test. And so I remember in that there was these 2 weeks where to worship the Lord honestly felt like defiance against everything in me, because I was just this doesn't make I don't understand anything that's happening. My dad had already died. My mom was about to die. We were stuck, we couldn't get on a flight. And it was just I don't see at all what the Lord could possibly be doing through any of this. And, I remember even thinking, when people are often in hard things and they'll be well, at least this, and they'll have this well, they were on hospice, but at least they didn't, they didn't feel any pain, or at least I don't know. And for both my parents, I feel like it was kind of worst case scenario for both of them. They both just had horrible endings to their lives. And I remember just thinking Lord, I don't understand what you're doing, but I'm going to worship you, not because I understand, but because I know this isn't the end of the story. I know the story will end with you redeeming all things, and I don't even see how you could redeem things like this, but I know you will. And so I think, sorry, that was a really long answer just to say, I think that it just has been a matter of immersing myself in the story of God and just seeing that He's always up to more than we can see. He's always doing more than we can even fathom. And most of the time, we won't even see it until we meet Him face to face. But just to trust in the darkness that, nothing is wasted, that He will redeem all things. And I think that has completely transformed the way that I can enter into others' pain, because now I'm not looking for that, well, at least this, or, look at this though. But it's just you know what? I don't understand either. And I don't have this, half-hearted answer to give you, or just this well, God works all things together for good, Band-Aid to put over it. But just to say I know that Jesus is with you in this, and he's coming alongside you. And we have a high priest who is able to relate to all of our suffering and our weaknesses. And He doesn't ask you to just rush along and put the bow at the end of the story, but that He does come and sit with us in it. And now I want to be someone who can come and sit with you in this, and not just kind of rush you to the conclusion, because often we don't know what that is. So
thank you guys for sharing that. I think that's really, really significant, that our faith isn't a coffee mug spirituality, right? Where we take platitudes that are plastered on coffee mugs and dole them out to people. The gospel is a far greater story than that, but it's also more complicated and more nuanced than that, right? That we don't sidestep pain. The gospel doesn't call us to whitewash our pain or even obliterate it. That it's that Jesus comes and sits with us in the dirt, in the midst of our pain. Thank you for your transparency in that.
Yeah.
Do you guys need to check in your kids? You good?
We'll just pretend
We'll just keep going.
It's just so quiet.
Let's just keep going.
Every time it's quiet in my house, hey, we turned the oven on.
Are you guys all good?
Yeah.
Is Zion there?
Yeah, we'll keep watching the
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
There was a good chance that Zion was just off, and they're
Unaware.
Where is he? They look up from the TV oh. That's what happens. I'm my older son, can you watch the kids? And it's well, this TV came on, and I don't know. I don't know where they went.
Find Zion later in the baptismal or something.
Right. Speaking of your kids, tell us more just about their experience. So they've shared, I love the stories that they've shared about what they love of living in your context, but even some of the challenges that come from as you guys have talked about, being in a different church every week while you're back here, not necessarily knowing where home is. So just kind of talk us about your experience parenting third culture kids. So for the uninitiated, third culture means that they are between cultures. They live in one context. They're from another. They don't feel like they belong in either, which is a missionary kid or a third culture kid experience. So have you guys experienced that? How do you walk your kids through some of those complexities, even though they're pretty young?
Yeah, we do lots of deep breaths.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that was very impactful for me was that I was listening to a gentleman. He was sharing about his experience as a third culture kid or as a TCK growing up on the missionary field. And he expressed that, I remember it was his opening line. And he said, "My dad was the best missionary, but he was a bad dad." And then the rest of his time, he talked about that and unfolding that and talked about how his dad was doing wonderful things, meaning like he was, people were coming to faith, planting churches, and so much was going on, and there's this idea of internal ministry and external ministry. And so he's talking about there was so much happening with the external ministry, but the internal ministry of caring for his kids was lacking. And this gentleman, was very open just about how that affected him, how it affected his brothers, the emotional struggles that they had growing up. And so I can be very prideful in wanting to be like a great overseas worker or a missionary and wanting to do that till the day I die. And really, when we first moved to Southeast Asia, I think that was really I had a lot of pride in that and a lot of we're just going to go, we're going to do it, I think, through this gentleman sharing his experience and reading books and just hearing about other experiences that third culture kids have had or parents who have raised third culture kids, it has allowed me to take a step back and really recognize the importance of nurturing and caring for our kids' hearts and the unique challenges that they face. James and Finley and Zion, our three children, are growing up in a situation that Emily and I never experienced. I was born in the home that my parents currently still live in, in the same town that I grew up in. And Emily also grew up in that town. And so this idea of identity or where we live, routines and stability was very much there. And for our children, it is very different living between two different contexts. And so I think as our kids have gotten older, especially the twins, Emily and I have had a lot more conversations about what does it mean to really care for them well? What does it mean to recognize their struggles? And then also, how do we be sensitive to caring for those struggles and not just saying, this is just part of what it is, but how can we be flexible in our ministry and our routines and our life where we live to be able to take a break or to be able to change things up in order to care for their spiritual needs, their emotional needs, and their physical well-being. But we are very blessed that in August, James and Finley made a profession of faith and wanted to be baptized, and they were baptized in the ocean in front of, a bunch of non-believers and making that profession of faith. And we're very grateful that they're growing in their understanding of what it means to be a child of God and wanting to faithfully submit to Him. But I think parenting has been the most difficult thing I've ever done. And I can't say like it's more difficult parenting kids in Southeast Asia than it is in America, but we are definitely always having to learn ways that we can really just enter into our kids' lives and figure out how we can best care for them. But generally speaking, they do love living in Southeast Asia. There are lots of fun things they enjoy doing, like going snorkeling or spearfishing on a weekly basis. Zion likes eating fish eyeballs. It's his weird, what do you call that? Addiction, I think there was a show actually, Strange Addictions for a long time.
He just has a bag of eyeballs.
He would have been on that fish eyeballs. Not just eyeballs. Fish eyeballs. But yeah, and so there's fun things like that they get to enjoy. But as they're preparing to go back to Southeast Asia at the end of the month with us, they are also grieving at the same time, leaving friends or family here that they maybe don't intend on seeing for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's just this constant paradox of they have these incredible experiences as TCKs and they've gone to all these different countries. They've been on all these different flights, and they speak 2 languages, and they have these wonderful things. And yet at the same time, there's great loss in that too. And so I think, like Jimmy said, learning to sit with them in that and not, just like I was sharing earlier, not trying to rush them to the, well, at least this, like look at the bright side, but being able to let them grieve that when they need to. And something that I'm always praying for them is just that they would really see Jesus as the one who does know and does understand and does walk with them through those things. And he really is the only one who can, because like Jimmy said, neither of us have any context for that, because we grew up in America, and I moved once growing up, and they've already moved. James and Finley are 8, and they've already moved like 4 times, and that doesn't even count all of the back and forth between the states and here. And so I think just really praying that these hard places would be where they really meet with Jesus and experience him in really profound ways. So
that's great. Given that there's not necessarily a church in your community that you guys can regularly fellowship with, just talk about how the Lord has sustained you in community. I know you do creative things in order to participate in services in other places, or even just to enjoy community in your home. So how have you guys gotten to experience that, and how the Lord tell us how the Lord has sustained your faith kind of over the years?
So we basically, one thing we do is every Sunday morning, whoever is there, we just have worship time that consists of, we always have one book of the Bible we're going through each month as a family. So we'll read a passage. So we have access to something called Right Now Media. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of that, but there's all kinds of like resources on there, but there's some different, like there's a Shane and Shane kids worship thing or some other things like that. So we usually let our kids watch one of those. Every Sunday morning, we have time to just read a passage. We pray together. Usually that means we share, how we can be praying for each other for that coming week. And so sometimes that's just our family that is part of that. But then on any given week, it just really depends. Sometimes we'll have like 5 different people staying with us. Sometimes it'll just be 1 or 2, but whoever is there joins us for that. And so we just try to have that, like that's our Sunday morning thing. And now that James and Finley are getting a bit older, we try to listen to a sermon or part of one online. Then we also have once a week, we have a prayer gathering for whoever in our little town wants to be part of that. So usually that's our family. And then there's one former Muslim in our town who is now a believer. And so he'll come for that. And then some of the national believers, the national workers that have, they've moved to that province as well. And so, sometimes we have, sometimes there's only like 5 people at that. And then sometimes there's 10 or 20. And then when we have different groups come through, different teams, they'll join for either of those things. So that's kind of our most consistent thing. But I think outside of that, we really see how just the global church has, been part of our just sustaining our faith and our growth. So that means like Jimmy has a couple different people who he's consistently talking with for accountability or mentoring him. And then same for myself. And then, like I mentioned, that friend and I are still reading through the Bible 1 book a month. And now there's kind of a community of us from all over the world. I think there's like maybe 25. And so we just kind of share what we're learning and how things are going on there. So that's kind of the general scope of things.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys are headed back just a few short days. I know you've answered this question before, but for our listener, what are you looking forward to? And then give us some ways that we can be praying with you.
I think one thing we're looking forward to is just the people. So those are just, our neighbors, just relationships that we've been pouring into and have been poured into by over the past 1.5 years. We're looking forward to seeing those people again, and also just the national workers that we've grown very close with. I think we're really looking forward to those relationships that we've established over the past term, but also specifically the past 1.5 years in where we live or where we moved to 1.5 years ago. I am looking forward to getting back to some beautiful things in nature that we have not been able to have in California, like just the beautiful coral reef and some wonderful waterfalls or the ability to get places quicker on a motorbike. But
You're not going to miss the 405 is what you're saying?
Yeah. It's memorable, that's for sure.
It is something. It is a jungle in itself, honestly.
I think for our whole family, something we always look forward to going back to is just routine. Because as much as fun as life in America is, it's really just like, we've stayed at probably, I don't know, maybe 12 different places already in just these last 2.5 months. And so that's a lot for all of us, but especially for our kids to just be in constant transition. And like, our youngest, every time we say, okay, we're going home, he'll say, which one? Because we just stay at so many different places. And so I think just to have routine and normalcy and having, knowing kind of what to expect each day is something that we're looking forward to having.
I'm not holding it.
Oh.
It's who holds the phone is what's, it's a big deal.
Do they want to come in and tell us something about their lives?
Oh, you get to have this cool microphone. Look at this.
Wait, why do I have to tap?
Look at that. Okay, I am here with James and Finley. You guys are joining us on this podcast. I want you to tell me, what is one of your favorite things about living at home where you get to go soon? What's something you just really, really, really love? It can be a food or a friend or something you get to do.
A food.
A food? Okay, tell me the food. What's your favorite food?
Nasi kuning.
I'm so familiar with that. But for the person who maybe doesn't know that, what is nasi kuni?
It's yellow rice with meat and lots of other stuff.
Yellow rice with meat and lots of other stuff. Sounds like it would be my favorite dish as well. That's awesome. Finley, what's something you love?
Snorkeling.
Snorkeling? Tell me what's some of the fish that you've seen while you've been snorkeling. You can just make it up because I don't know anything about fish, so you can just make up names.
I see Nemo.
You saw Nemo? The actual Nemo?
Clownfish.
Did he find his family? Yeah, he did. That's great. Your dad was telling us that you guys do spearfishing too? How many fish have you caught?
You can make up any number, James. Just joking.
Okay, have you caught at least
110.
You've caught 110 fish with a spear gun? That's incredible. Okay, you guys are getting to go back in just a few days, get to go back home. What are you most looking forward to about being back home?
Friends.
Your friends?
Yeah.
That's great.
What do you like to do with your friends, James?
Play with them.
Of course. What else would you do? You're not doing work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Finley, how about you? What are you most looking forward to about being home?
Friends too.
Yeah, friends. That's great. Well, I'm so thankful that your parents were here with us. Thank you guys for being with us here. Thank you for you guys have just given us so much time this week. It's been so great to hear from you guys and from your parents what God is doing. Just so thankful for the partners that God has given us. I'm thankful for people who were here and now God has taken to another place. So thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for Season 4 of Magnify. Hopefully you'll be able to join us for Season 5, which will begin streaming in February of 2024. Thanks for listening.